No man is more professional than I. I am a 1% man. I am not above or below any man. I'm training my mind. I'm building my body. I'm connecting to my soul. I'm investing my money. Welcome to the 1% Man Podcast. Let's go, go, go. 3, 2, 1. I want to welcome you back to the 1% Man Podcast. I have my good friend here with me, Misty McIntyre. Misty, I said it right.
You did.
Yes. Okay. I'm 1 for 2. I recorded 2 podcasts today. The first one, I totally butchered that name. This one, I got it. So I'm glad. Misty, how you feeling today?
I am good. It's the end of the day, winding down, and this is a really good way to bring it to a satisfying close. This is fun.
Exactly. So Misty, being a sex therapist and a marriage and relationship coach, helping high performers create happy and healthy romantic relationships. How did you stumble upon that?
Stumble is the operative word here. In all transparency, when I was in undergrad, I switched my major literally 6 times. Knew I wanted to help people, but wasn't sure in what capacity. And I was a sports enthusiast. So I was like, we'll go the physical therapy route. And I actually got rejected from the medical college. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And one of my teachers at the time was a marriage therapist, and he taught our human sexuality class. And I can remember the day that he brought Kama Sutra and had us watch all of this detail explaining different sexual paraphernalia, and was talking about relationships in his private practice. I was like, you get to do this for a living? That is really cool. And I just started talking to him and was like, okay, well, that's kind of neat. But I graduated and was like, what the heck do I do now? At the time, it was a huge recession, nobody was hiring. And I was like, well, I guess I'll go back to grad school. And I found a program that was still taking applications, and they interviewed me and ended up giving me a scholarship and a job. So once I was there, I knew I was in the right place. So it was a stumbling, but it was meant for me to be there. Everything just it resonated with me, and I loved learning. I was so hungry to learn, and I graduated top of my class. So it happened upon me, but I don't think it was by default. I think it was by design. But in another sense, I've always been fascinated in relationships, and I was always the go-to person, in my friend circle, and even my parents, asking me for advice and venting to me. And I was always a really good secret keeper. So I just found a way to turn it into a career.
I love that. You literally monetized being the best keep it seeker, the best
right?
Relationship seeker in your friendship circle and family. So Misty, something we like to do here, I like to ask my guests 3 questions, so that way they can get to know you better, and they can explore how you think and how you view the world. So question number 1 is, what's your favorite color and why?
Favorite color, man, I'm going to say this at the risk of sounding so basic, but I'm going to go with white. I have a lot of white decor, but I like it because it feels clean. It feels very, helps my brain feel organized, but I also like it because it's versatile. It goes with everything. So if I need to make it purple, I can make it purple. If I need to make it brown, I can make it brown. If I need to make it blue, I can make it blue. So I can always add a splash of something to it and mix it up when I get tired of being basic.
Okay, I can deal with that. Go with white. And then second question is, what is one value you would teach all men in the world to make it a better place for everyone?
Ooh, man, I've been thinking about this question. And I think it comes down to 2 answers, but I think the one answer I have sort of encompasses both of them. But I think the idea of consciousness, creating higher consciousness, to the point that we can be so self-aware, and that we can reflect on how we show up in the world, whether it's our core values, how we think, how we emote, our habits, how we just show up in the world, right? And the sense of identity that we embody. I think if we could do that, that it helps with the second thing, and that's emotional intelligence. I think men are being invited to step into this evolution of developing that higher intelligence in terms of emotions, right? Um, it's something when I'm working with couples, when I'm working with women, when I see men that they've never really been taught how to do it, what it looks like, how it feels. Um, and so I think if they were to have that sense of consciousness and elevating and being their 2.0 version of themselves and not just the money and the house and the car and all of the things, that they're actually like living life on this soul level, and they can heal along the way, and they can transform conditioning and patterns that are keeping them stuck that they might not even be aware of. Man, I think magic happens.
Wow. And I love that, because we're definitely going to dive into that today. Now, number 3, what is another profession you would choose to be an expert in beside the one that you are in right now?
Oh gosh. I would probably be like some kind of combination of realtor, house flipper, investment property seeker / interior decorator. Like one of those people. I don't necessarily want to be a realtor, but real estate fascinates me. I'm super into it.
I love it. So a combination of like in the real estate space, just put it all together, like boom.
Yeah, like I love seeing the potential in things and being like, oh my gosh, my husband and I have an inside joke. He can like be driving down the road and see this really like condemned house that's literally full of rotting wood, and he'll be like, "Oh, that could be so cute fixed up," says my wife. And I'm like,
No, I love.
Wait, well, it could.
No, it definitely could. I think that's what it takes. It's just you want to be an investor, be able to have that vision in forefront and see that. So that's amazing. So today, I know I brought you on because I really want to talk to single men about preparing to have healthy, happy, romantic relationships, right? I think it's something that we're not taught how to do. As a single man myself, all I remember being taught growing up was how to get girls, how like literally getting girls was just like how to get more sex to validate to my friends that like, yo, I'm a man. And the more women I got, the more manly I was, but the more empty I felt. And then now as I'm older, I'm looking like, hey, I want to be married one day and I want to have a family and all that. But the something is that a lot of us have never have the 5-step program or the 7-step program. I'm like, how do we prepare for this at all? Besides getting money, right? There's that we know, like, hey, money's an important piece. But even the way we view money, right? It's like most men are like, well, I don't want a woman that just wants me for my money. And I think we were talking before, how should we view money in terms of getting it as a man?
I think if you're looking at money through this, I'll be successful when, I'll be loved when, then it's sort of this utopian syndrome, right? And whether it's 50 grand a year or 70 grand a year or 250 grand a year, it's always going to feel like some kind of moving goalpost. You're never going to really get there. Always going to feel unfulfilled. But I think if you're looking at money through this lens of what it creates for you, and again, this is where some of that consciousness piece comes in, is what is the sense that you get? Like, what is the emotional experience you have when you have money? Is it fulfillment? Is it freedom, right? To do some of the things that you do enjoy? Is it, does money then give you leverage so that you can maybe spend more time with your family? Whatever it might be, or the family you want to have someday. Does it give you the ability to provide? There's lots of different things, but I think if we can also consider money as, at least from a female perspective, not that anybody needs to go chase a gold digger, right? But money can represent a sense of security, stability, and certainty for people, women specifically. And certainty is one of the needs that we have in relationships. It's one of those core emotional needs that we have. And so if they can look at somebody and be like, oh, he's got his life together, he's grounded, right? He's not addicted to money in the sense he can't be emotionally available to me, but he's rock solid. He's, got his own thing going on. And I just add to the magic. I don't create the magic. I think it shows you've got yourself together. And that's probably going to attract a more high vibe lady.
Ooh, something that I always harp on is I hate how I see people always are like, oh, I was broke and then I met her and then now I'm so excited and then I changed myself, right? I hate those stories, especially for men, because I'm always like, if you always have to seek outside validation from the woman you're seeking or for something else outside of you, then you're always going to be seeking it, right? I think it's good to a certain point, but if someone else causes you to change and you never feel to change yourself, that means when that person is gone, you're going to go back to wherever you used to be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the idea in relationships is that if you have an unshakable core, right, you're really rock solid in who you are and how you show up in the world, and it's aligned with what you want, then you're going to make magic with someone. We don't want like half of me and half of you coming together to make one whole person. We want two whole, complete, grown ass people coming to the table to make magic. Right?
Preach.
We ain't talking codependency here. No, we're doing the adult thing.
Okay, so I love that you just touched on codependency, right? Codependency is something that we do a lot of, right? And we're unaware of it. Can you explain what that means and what it looks like too as well?
Gosh, it shows up in so many different ways. It might even be easier to talk about the ways it doesn't show up. But a lot of times, like when we can't get our own resources met through ourselves and we depend on other people, and I'm not saying getting emotional needs met, but when we need to be some figure in someone's life to feel good about ourselves, right? So a lot of times this shows up as the savior, right? Like liking to sweep in and save people, rescue people.
Damsels in distress got to be saved by
Yeah.
somebody. Come on.
Even women do it, right? Like I can't tell you how many women I see that love a fixer-upper and they want to play around with a fuck boy, right? And who might not be ready or committed to a relationship, but they see the potential and they see him as a project and they're drawn to the fixer-upper idea of a relationship. Oh, if I could just change this about him, or I guess guys do it too. Oh, if I could just tweak this about her, but rather than embracing people as they are and as they're showing up, we get really attached to also people's emotions, like feeling like we're responsible for their emotions. We don't own our own feelings. We don't own our own actions, and we make other people responsible for our own stuff and how we show up in the world.
Oh, wow. I love what you just said. And I want to I want to go back a little bit on what you said about women attracting like fixer uppers or even fuck boys, right? And I think it's almost there's a big thing that we always hear about, like good guys finish last. And do you find that to be true, or do you think that it's just that it's a certain age bracket that women are just like, and that there's like a bad boy phase, that she's just attracted to bad boys, and then, or how does that function?
I'll be honest with you. That wasn't my experience. I was never attracted to the bad boy. I was always attracted to the good boys, but I think it has to do with your conditioning. I was very attracted to stability, safety, security. And so my husband was all of those things. I knew he had it together. I knew he'd be kind. I knew that he would be good to me and treat me well. And so I never really ventured into the whole bad boy thing. I think for some people, the bad boy is a way for them to meet the other emotional need, which is like a sense of adventure and spontaneity. And for the most part, I think people don't recognize that sometimes security is sexy, that they sometimes get hooked on the emotional roller coaster of what love or a trauma bond looks like. What they think love should feel like. Oh, it's this roller coaster. It's these really high highs and these really low lows. And, it's all this just endorphins and everything's pumping and it feels so exciting. But I don't know that we've ever really been taught to look for like secure in terms of like attachment style, right? We kind of go out there looking for adventure and spontaneity. And sometimes it might just be the season of life people are in, not ready for something like that.
Exactly. I love that you said that. I think in terms of men, when we're ready to commit and we're ready to shake all that stuff off, right? And when the veil gets removed from my eyes and we're like, okay, you know what? I can't keep doing. I think the Bible has a great verse that says, like, when I was a child, I did things as a child. When I was a man, I put away childish things. So when we're ready to step into that like man role and that man routine, first things first, I think we both could agree, like seeing money as a resource for security and stability, right? When we want to pursue a woman that's desirable and in terms of marriage, right? In terms of also being a wife and providing and all that. But something that I'm seeing, and before we get on that, is that like a lot of people get caught up into like, I want to get married. I want to get married. And they're so focused on the marriage that they forget that, hey, after marriage, there's a whole relationship after it. All right. Do you notice that? And how do we switch our view from like, I want to get married to, hey, I want to have a healthy romantic relationship with somebody. And then after that, I want to, do forever with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Again, I think this comes back to that unshakable core, right? Like if you're clear on your core values and someone coming into your life just adds value to it, like they complement life and they're the icing on the cake, they're not the cake, right? that really sets us up for a little more success. But I would even say that a lot of people prepare for the wedding and not even the marriage. That we live in a culture where the divorce rate for first time marriages is 50%. Second marriages is somewhere between 60 and 70, and third marriages teeters closer to 30%. So we know that the divorce isn't necessarily the answer, right? For many people it is, but for the majority, it can't be the case. But I think what people fail to do is sometimes grow and grow with each other. And so the container in which their relationship is housed stays really small. And then when they hit this new season of life, like let's say then you want to have kids or you've been married 4 years or heck, infertility pops up or boom, business is bad. And, now money is kind of shaky or unpredictable to come by. Then we don't know how to grow that container. And so if we're outgrowing the relationship, it just hurts. It becomes uncomfortable. And then we avoid stuff. Or then we start to have conflict. I think if we can keep a growth mindset that conflict is growth trying to happen or discomfort is growth trying to happen, that more people would probably step into like, oh, okay, like this is a matter of constantly like negotiating and renegotiating and exploring and getting to know each other. It's not a matter of, hey, I know all this about you and I don't ever have to ask it again. Like if we continue to be conscious and show up with each other, that's where the growth happens.
I love what you just said, that it is a constant negotiate, renegotiate, and that it's not ever going to be like, I know everything I need to know. Now I know that when you wake up in the morning, I need to touch you here, or I need to leave you alone. And they say, good morning like this. I need to talk to you like this. It should always be an exploration phase, right? Always exploring that person and also growing with that person. What is that? So what is it like to not grow with somebody? Because I think it's great to show all like the lovey-dovey side and all that, but what does it not look like in terms of if I'm not growing with my partner, and how can I talk to my partner and be like, hey, you're not growing, so I need you to grow or we're gonna end. This is like before we're ever married or anything like that, but like we're in a relationship with somebody, they're not growing. You got to talk to them about growing. How does that work?
I think these are some of the conversations that can happen early on when you are getting to know each other. Like, hey, if you know what your core values are, like, hey, I really value growth, in a relationship. I'm always in like personal development books and, I'm a self-help junkie and I'm always like in a program learning how to, make myself the best version of myself. Is that you? Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but it gives you valuable information about them. Right. And based on your core values. And most people's core values don't always align 100%. But if you're knowing these things early on and you're staying grounded, like one of the big mistakes I see people make is they get so turned, I don't want to say turned on by somebody, but they're so into the idea of somebody that they start to compromise their own values and their own integrity for the sake of making the relationship work. And then they wonder why it's crumbly later. Right. So I think if we're like unapologetically authentic about who we are and so grounded, we can be like, hey, this is who I am. I'm willing to grow, but like some of these core values can't be compromised. Yeah, I could learn to fold a towel a little differently and I'm willing to do that. But, in terms of the things, my core, that's unshakable. Right.
I love what you just said. I love it. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to say, because personal story, I have jumped into a relationship with somebody just because I was like, yo, I want to be married so bad and this is going to work. I'm going to make this work. Right. Like this, like almost like almost like an unshakable, like not looking at the like the things that are blatantly in front of me. And then I'm like, and then a few months like later, I'm like, actually not even months, just weeks later, I'm like, yo, this person is just not this. Then when I really take the blinders off, you see what I'm saying? So is that what you're saying? Is that like not blindly just like look at this person as they are, but you look at them as who you think they can be, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, neurologically and chemically, when we get into a relationship, the first phase is a honeymoon phase. And this is where we're literally blinded by all of the oxytocin and bonding hormones that make us feel like we're in love, but we're really just kind of drunk off our asses, on all of those feel good hormones. And so we find ourselves saying little lies here and there. Like, she might be like, I love getting flowers. And you're like, I know I'm not a flower giving dude, but oh yeah, I do that all the time. Yeah, I think we lie somewhere around eight. Okay, don't quote me on it because I can't recall where it came from off the top of my head, but somewhere around like 18 times an hour. Maybe it's a day. I don't know. Don't quote me, but it's a bunch. We lie.
So basically, we're just liars.
We're great big liars. But then, we bring our best selves to the table. We want to be liked. We want to be loved. We want to feel worthy in the sense of love and connection and belonging. We're wired for it, biologically wired for it. And so when that doesn't happen, or let's say it's 2 weeks into the relationship, 4 months in, 4 years later, and then we start to see the dark spots and the warts and the bumps and the moles and the things that we don't like. We're like, ooh, I need to either get them to change or I need to bounce. And for some people in the dating scene, it's a good opportunity to be like, okay, this isn't a fit. Maybe I need to get out. But for people who end up getting married and they hit that power struggle, what it looks like to not grow then means like the same day-to-day stuff every day where the thoughts don't change, the feelings don't change, and the behaviors don't change. So it's super conditioned habitual patterning. And it's usually filled with things like resentment, boredom, frustration, annoyance. That's what it looks like to not grow.
Wow. I'm kind of blown away. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I'm totally blown away because I'm like, these are things that should be taught, but are never taught.
Agreed.
Oh my God.
So like people want us to have the beautiful, wedding and the happy marriage, but nobody's actually given us the skills to do so. They're teaching us about like
the icing, but not the
cake. Yes. Or they're teaching us about, how to find the area of a parallelogram on the 3rd of December. I don't know. Something that doesn't even make sense or apply.
I've never used geometry ever since I got out of it. Mentally, I'm not there. I hire somebody out for that, right? But I know our time is winding down a little bit, but I do want to get on this. I know communication is such a big problem in relationships, right? How do we learn it? How do we learn our partner? And especially, how do we learn to communicate with our partner too, as well? Because something that I've seen in my own self is that I'll communicate, but then they won't understand what I'm saying, or I don't understand what they're saying. And naturally, they're like, "Well, you should understand me by now. We've been talking for 6 months, or we've been talking for this. Why don't you understand what I'm saying? Why aren't we clicking? Everyone wants to click. Like, I don't need to talk. You should just know, right?"
I think communication is one of those things that is icing. It's not the cake, and I think that's a myth. Right? That you hear so many people talk about how communication is key, and it is important. Communication might be key, but connection is king. But people think that connection is all about the connection to your other person. How do I get them to connect with me more? How do I connect with them more? But the idea is that we have to be able to deeply connect with ourselves, or we can't really connect fully with other people. And so, for example, when it comes to communication, if we're like, oh, that thing you did, like it annoys me. Like, can you stop doing that? Or, hey, can you do more of that? Or, hey, we're not having sex as frequently. Like, it becomes a very superficial conversation that is all about like behavior modification, right? Do more of this, do less of that. And it's usually going to be perceived as some form of criticism. So it's going to spawn some line of defense, right? So somebody's going to be like, I don't do that. Well, you do that too. Well, what about the other day? Like, and then you start to ping back and forth and you go nowhere until like somebody shuts down and you do the same shit different day over the next topic. So that becomes your pattern. in the relationship. But more people think it's about the topic. So communication and connection is really more about like the process than sometimes it is about the content. So if you're deeply connected to yourself, then you know, oh, here's when I get defensive in a relationship. And if I'm feeling unappreciated or like I'm not good enough for my partner or this girl out there that I'm chasing, relationships are mirrors for our internal self and the backs of our own heads, the parts of ourselves we can't see. So if I'm feeling that about her, where do I need to look inward to feel appreciated? That goes back to something you said earlier about, how do you get your partner to grow? That's relationship sabotage. So most people try to get their partner to communicate differently, grow differently, get their partner to be different, do more of this, less of that. But it will sabotage your relationship every single time because controlling someone else's behavior is not a controllable.
Can you say that again, please? Because I don't think they heard you. They didn't hear you at all.
Controlling someone else's behavior is not a controllable. Stay in your own lane. That's one of the biggest tools in relationships, and that your partner is going to show you a reflection of something that's going on internally.
Man. So if someone does have a lot of internal issues going on, right? Say, especially I think, because I've noticed that since going to therapy, since working on myself, journaling and all that, I have like this like newfound like, call it the matrix or like I have these like, spiritual goggles or whatever. But I've noticed I can almost like tell when someone hasn't done some work on them. And I'm like, sounds like you got some issues. How do you communicate like, hey, maybe you should go to therapy or maybe you should do this, without like telling them like, hey, you got a lot of mental issues. Not that I don't want to be with you. I'll grow with you, but you got a lot of issues in a nice way,
Is this in a marriage or in a dating relationship?
Just in a dating relationship. Like you're interested in a girl. You think she's nice. You know what I mean? And then you find out later, you're like, okay, well, she got some issues. Like, I know I got issues too, but like, how do you nicely tell it to a woman? You know what I'm saying? Because I think one thing is, I don't believe all women are super emotional and all that, but I do think that like you want to be careful on how you say things to people. You know what I'm saying? Because you want to say it in such a way that it causes relationship to move forward, not backwards. So how can we say it in a way that moves the relationship forward?
Yeah. So I think curiosity is such a tool. Right. So when you notice that someone is like maybe triggered by something, first and foremost, I'm not saying it is a red flag, but you need to take that in as data. Because if you've got someone that is triggered AF, like the moment that you ordered a hot dog instead of the hamburger that they thought you would have, like that's information about the kind of person you may or may not want to be in a relationship with. And that's one of the biggest issues I see is that sometimes people ignore red flags. But it's also because they don't do the important internal work of knowing what their own core values are. So knowing what their boundaries are, what's negotiable, what's non-negotiable, right? Like, so it might be like, okay, cool. So like she has some daddy issues and it makes sense. I can handle that. But if it's like, oh, like she is stalking me in my social media and wants passwords to all my stuff because she has such deep seated like insecurity and trust issues. And she wants like Life 360 on my phone already. Like, ooh, that might be, that might compromise the boundary a little bit. But if you don't know what those things are for you, it's really hard to assess if someone's actually going to be able to fit with you or not. But in terms of bringing something up, I think it's always a good idea to be curious. And it would be a good time to practice being vulnerable. This is something I wish more men would do, practice being vulnerable. So let's say, you're getting to know somebody and you see that there's some issues, right? And being able to say, yeah, how does that feel for you? Oh, and showing empathy. Yeah, imagine. Yeah, that sounds really hard. Like, I had a similar issue once and, I worked with this coach or I worked with this therapist. It was really helpful for me. Have you ever been to therapy? Anything like that? It can bring up a big conversation. Is that something you're open to? Man, I love growth. Is that something you value? I will always have a mentor in my back pocket kind of thing. Especially if you're just getting to know somebody, that might be what that dialogue would look like. But again, not pushing off our own agenda on someone else if we see that they've got issues.
I love that. I think that's a great way to not say, I don't want to say sneak that in there, but just be like, okay, I like doing this. This is an issue that I faced before. This is how I faced it. Open up and be a little vulnerable. And then after that, say, hey, what about you? So giving them room to at least communicate as well back to you as well. So, I know I know we're winding down. I keep saying this, winding down on time and stuff like that, because we literally are. But for you, what do you see, especially that you've worked with high performance men and women, what do you see as the key thing that's kind of holding us back, and things that we can prepare to work on now that we're single?
Okay, so two things come to mind. One is the ability to practice vulnerability. The other is,
Can you break down practicing vulnerability, what that looks like? Because I think I think a lot of men say, well, I'm trying to be vulnerable, but then I don't think they know exactly what vulnerability looks like. Does it look the same in every relationship or not? I think that'd be a better question.
I think vulnerability, it looks different at different times. Like vulnerability might be initiating a first kiss on a first date with someone you're really into. It's anything that's requiring emotional risk, where there's possibly some fear that you might not, add up, that you might be inadequate, that you might be rejected, that you might not be loved or liked. It can look like calling a friend after his dad died. It can look like interviewing for a position that you're extremely over or underqualified for. It can be going to the doctor to hear that you've got some kind of health issue that's not going to go away, right? It can look very differently across the board. But in terms of being vulnerable in relationships, I think it's the courage to be authentic and genuine, and to just fully show up for yourself, even when it feels hard or scary. Brene Brown does a lot of work around vulnerability, and she's the master at that, not me. But but so many people, for instance, in relationships, I see like guys and they're like, man, I want to be close to her, but I'm just scared that, she thinks that I'm not enough. And they're not talking about those things. In relationships, it looks like I'm tired of hearing you nag, and, I'm tired of you controlling my life, but he's not talking about what's really there if you were to peel back the layers, right? The more vulnerable, softer sides. And that doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean being feminine. It's literally like just being super in touch with like your emotional experience and being able to share where you're at with somebody. And what was the other question?
Question was, since you work with high performance men and women, what is something that you feel like is holding them back, and what's something that we can work on right now, since currently in our single lives, so we can prepare?
Yeah. So the other thing I think is inner child work. And inner child work. So whether we have experienced a trauma that was big, or small traumas that are like death by 1,000 cuts, we usually have some experience of the world in some way in which we were conditioned, even if we had a great childhood, that is transgenerational. And so we kind of learn about relationships based off what we saw our parents or our caregivers or our friends or our neighbors or our aunts and uncles, what we saw them do. And that comes to be just our narrative and how we show up and how we do relationships. If we saw, a dad that didn't do conflict, we might not do conflict. Not because we don't want to, and not because we don't aspire to be better, but because we literally don't have a manual on how to do it. We only know how to not do it, right? So we might have a tendency to avoid. So most people don't know how to sit with the areas that need healing so that they can be the highest versions of themselves. Because what will happen every single time in a relationship is that your partner, whoever you get with, whether it's a girlfriend, whether it's a wife, whoever, they are going to trigger the shit out of you. And the things that are triggered is just going to reveal the areas in which you're not yet free and the areas that need healing. But if people do the healing early on, then they can learn to have a relationship that triggers represent growth and connection, as opposed to conflict and the breakdown of a relationship.
Man, that was like, I should have asked you that as the last word, because that was just like that you could just like put a stop on that and be like, yo, rewind that, play that again, because that I think if more men listen to what you just said about inner child work, I think more people would have more satisfying relationship, right? And then not only satisfying relationship, but they would be more satisfied with themselves, and they would like themselves. I'm talking about like, self-love, and I'm talking about liking themselves. They would be able to sleep at night and be like, you know what? I'm enough. Boom. She left me. Oh, cool. I'm enough. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm out here and I'm chasing my dreams. I'm not getting all these women, but I'm enough. You know what I mean? Like, that whole piece is so huge, especially with the world bombarding us and saying like, if you don't have a 6-figure business, like you're nothing. If you don't do this, you're not manly enough. If you're showing your emotions, dude, that's weak. Like, how many women have you slept with, And that takes me back, because I remember this guy in high school. He said like, on a weekend, if I don't get a blowjob this weekend, I'm not a man. You know what I mean? And like, that's the mentality that I know that we're growing up with in high school. And I know it hasn't changed, because in college it's 10 times worse, right? In college it's like, this sex fever all around. So I want to ask before we go is like, does sex play a part into how we connect with people, right? Like, should we be waiting, or should we, or is sex something okay to like indulge in?
I think it depends on the person, and again, what some of your core values are. There are some people out there that they really want to wait because it's aligned with their core values and the negotiations between them and their partner, and that's fantastic. And then there are some people that are like, I really want to explore. I want to test drive before I commit, and I want to really, experiment with my own sexuality so I can know that inside and out. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's any judgment attached to it. There's no good, bad, right, or wrong, but being unapologetic about what you want to do, right? And what feels good and aligned for you and how you want to show up in your life. I think there are pros and cons to probably both.
Yes, I'm with it. I agree. Now, Miss, this is part of the show where I like to give you the last word. So what is something that you carry with you throughout your day, or maybe something you've learned in life that you want to share with us before we go?
Oh gosh, springing this one on me.
And it could be anything. I know, right? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be anything that we talked about in the show. It could be something that you just live by, maybe a mantra, maybe like 2 words, whatever it is you want to tell us before we go.
Oh goodness, that is such a good one. On the spot. Gosh. Okay, say the question again.
So, what is something that you've learned, something that you carry with you, mantra, anything that you want to share with us before we go and end the show?
Okay. I'm going to say this. Your worthiness in this life is non-negotiable. You can negotiate contracts, you can negotiate salaries, you can negotiate boundaries, but your self-worth is non-negotiable. So know and believe that you are a miracle. And when you forget, get the support and help and guidance you need to remember that.
You heard it here first. Until next time, my brother, your legacy starts today.
Thank you, my friend, for tuning into today's episode. This means so much to us over here at the 1% Man community. Now, we want to extend a hand of gratitude to you. So I have a free gift for you. All you have to do is go to www.the1percentman.com/podcast gift. This is an exclusive gift for listeners that tune into our podcast. So go over there, get that free gift as well. And now I have 2 simple acts of you. 1, hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment and a 5-star review, because that helps us to see what you love about the podcast, and that helps us to bolster up in the rankings so more people can find us and listen to this pertinent information that we have for men of today's age. Last but not least, I want you to go back and listen to this podcast. Find just one thing that you can implement in your life today so you can move forward. Remember, progress over perfection. And till next time, my friend, your legacy starts today.